Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Caged In. This is a Caged In interview, and I had the absolute pleasure and honour to speak to Brian Taylor, the director of some of your favourite films, whether you know it or not. He's one of the two minds responsible for the Crank series, the fantastic films with Jason Statham, something that we talk about in this podcast, as well as Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, Gamer, Mum and Dad, and one of the hands in making Happy, the Netflix series, which if you haven't watched it, I'd started watching it just before doing this interview with Brian. So I didn't go into it too deep because I felt like I'd be caught out if I kind of like started going, oh yeah, I love Happy. And for him to be like, oh yeah, what did you think of this episode or something like that? Or yeah, so if I don't go too deep into that, that's why I caught a couple of episodes before we recorded this conversation. But I knew I was in for a good conversation with this one because at the start, like of the Zoom chat, I asked Brian. I said, like, do you mind if I have a beer whilst we do this? And he said to me, give me 2 minutes. And he's like, I'm going to join you in having a beer. And when that happens, you know, all right, the shoulders can go down, you can relax. This is going to be a fun one. And this is a conversation that genuinely doing this podcast, like I'm amazed when anyone who has worked with Cage in any way wants to speak to me. And I don't know, so I was just so excited and like slightly nervous recording this one, but I think it makes for a really, really good conversation. I rarely listen back to stuff just because I hate the sound of my own voice, and I don't know, I'm just overly critical of myself. But I listen back to this one, and it's really, really good. Like, I don't know, we talk about some really interesting stuff, and yeah, we get an insight into Brian's career and what it was like working with Nick Cage. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did, like having this conversation. So yeah, I'll be back at the end to kind of say how good the conversation was and tell you what's coming up next week. So yeah, enjoy this conversation with the one, the only, the fantastic Brian Taylor. Today, guys, I am joined by director, part of the dynamic duo Neville Dean and Taylor, and of course the director of both Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance and Mum and Dad, the fantastic Brian Taylor. How are we today, Brian?
Doing great, sir. Doing great. I am under self-quarantine in Austin, Texas, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I could think of worse places to be during a quarantine.
Much worse. I had barbecue breakfast tacos and beer this morning for breakfast, and doing quite well.
That sounds like my kind of quarantine. Perfect. So, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about how did you get into filmmaking, like, to start off with? Like, what was it that you saw and was like, you know what, that's what I want to do?
Well, that's a long story. I mean, I guess, I guess I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I didn't really understand what a director was when I was a kid. I assumed the director was the guy that shot the movie. And later I learned that's the DP. But my feeling as a kid, which really hasn't changed much over the years, it's like, well, if you're not shooting the movie, what are you doing? I mean, I didn't even understand the director. It seems like a fake job. Isn't the guy making the movie the guy making the movie? So, but I always kind of kept that attitude, and which is why, from the beginning, I've always had a really strong hand in the look of anything that I do and the shooting of it. I started out as a DP, at least in the movie business. I did, and did that for about a year because, I just always wanted to be one of those directors that really knows camera, that's not just relying on a DP to sort of set the look for you and tell your story for you. I mean, I wanted to be the type of director that chooses every lens, every angle, that understands the light, that understands the movement, and really kind of know every aspect of the job.
Well, yeah, you can definitely see that through the style that, especially, well, from the get go with the Crank films. There's just that, I guess it's dynamic and kinetic style of just like you don't know where the camera is going to be. And as I was saying to you before we started recording, like that hit me at an age, I guess I would have been about 14, 15 years old when I first saw the first Crank film. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's this perfect mixture of just like batshit crazy action with moments of just mania and pure beauty. I'd say, especially like there's a moment always stuck with me in the first Crank film where there's like projections of like fish upon the wall. And it's just like within this kind of
turtles fucking, isn't it?
Yes. But there's something beautiful about that. Obviously, the way it's lit and just kind of like within this. Almost, it's hard to pin what genre the Crank films are. Right? They're kind of a beast unto their own.
Yeah, they're pretty absurd. I mean, it's a great. That's a great. I think it's the ideal age to encounter the Crank movies is 15. Preferably, if you're like one of those kind of glue sniffing 15-year-olds.
I may have divulged elements of my past on this podcast, but we'll leave them for people to dig around and find. So I'll.
But I think on those movies, Mark and I were like definitely pioneers of sort of this do-it-yourself Gonzo kind of filmmaking, and it's fun to look back on those movies because we really didn't know what we were doing. And we're just sort of making it up as we go along. But I will say that pertinent to this podcast, when we finally got that movie set up and it was a question of casting, Nick Cage was one of the first names that came up.
Oh, wow.
We really wanted Nick to be Jeff Chelios at the time. But he was, and obviously he was at a different place in his career when that was 2006.
Yeah.
And we just, honestly, we just couldn't afford him. But yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine the Crank movies with Nick?
They would be a totally wilder beast, maybe, than they are. But I think, I would love to thank you for the casting of Jason Statham, because I feel like we realised his proper comedy chops in just playing this straight man down the line kind of. He didn't realize the kind of magic that he had and kind of really utilized it probably later in his career when we saw like his turn in Spy, where he's kind of a turn of like comedy genius. He steals that movie, and I think it's very much, your guys like kind of bringing that out of him in those movies.
Well, yeah. So when his name came up, it's so funny because like now it's hard to picture anybody else in that role, but that's the way it always is, once a person has made it their own, it's really hard to see it another way. But when we first met Jason, I didn't even want to meet with him, honestly, because my feeling was like, I love that guy, but that's Guy Ritchie's dude.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's Guy Ritchie's dude. So it's like, we want to get our own guy. We want to, we don't want to use Guy Ritchie's guy. And, obviously, I had a lot of love for Guy Ritchie. I mean, to me, that was like, him and Tarantino were like the up and coming balls to the walls filmmakers that we just like, everybody wanted to be like that, so, but we don't want to copy him. We wanted to do our own version. Right. So I was like, I don't know about Statham. And also, the character was supposed to be an LA based guy, so having a Brit do it felt a little weird too, but we agreed to meet him. And if you've ever had the good fortune of sort of being in Statham's orbit, hanging out with him or talking with him for any period of time, you probably know how well that meeting went, because he's just like, he's the coolest dude, and the first thing that he said was, guys, I got to tell you, I don't do comedy. And I was like, well, first of all, I've seen you in the Guy Ritchie movies, and I kind of disagree because you're fucking hilarious in those movies, number one. Number two, it kind of works better if you just play it straight and let all the absurd things happen around you. So I don't see that as a problem at all. And then, after you get to know him, you're like, the act, he wanted to know, should I do this with an American accent? Absolutely not. Like, this is your thing. There's people in LA from all over the place.
Yeah,
Nobody will question it. Nobody's going to question it. Just do your thing. We want you. And it worked out great. And then when the second movie came along, when it came time to Crank 2, well, now we knew it was Jason. So now I can write distinctly for his voice. So I'm actually putting in sort of rhyming slang and, things that I know he'll say really well and just playing into that. And also we had the chance in the second movie to not just have him be a straight man, but actually do straight up slapstick physical comedy. And he's so good at it. I mean, he's hilarious. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys. So Nick Cage is a guy who's probably we've seen probably every color in the paint box for Nick Cage. He's had the kind of career where he's given us kind of every possible thing that an actor can do.
Yeah.
And that's a blessing. It's an amazing thing to have a career like that, because there's a lot of guys that are like Statham. Or another example is Christopher Maloney, who I just did this television show, Happy.
Yeah, fantastic. Like,
and this is the kind of guy. Him and Statham both. A lot of actors never have a chance to show you everything that they can do. So Statham, for instance, he was very monotone, and he was just sort of like this surly presence, and you could tell he was great, but he had so much more to offer. And Christopher Maloney too, everybody knew him from this SVU show, but that guy is like just incredibly good. He can do everything that an actor can do. He's incredible with comedy, and a lot of these guys just never have a chance to stretch those wings and really do it. But then it's funny when you think of Nick, because not only has Nick showed you over the course of his career everything that he can sort of do, all these different aspects of it, but usually all in the same movie he can do that.
Well, yeah, and he'll find these kind of pockets in films that, like, he'll still find a different shade of that color within different roles. So, like, you may have seen, like, kind of manic guy looking for revenge, but then he gets cast in, like, Panos Cosmatos's Mandy, and then it's like, oh no, now we've got this kind of art house man seeks revenge, and it's like this is a different shade of red, as it were, than we've seen before. And he's an ever surprising like presence. And I like when it comes to the Ghost Rider film that you guys did with him recently. I've been watching some interviews with Nick, and he said that obviously the first film he didn't get the opportunity to be the Ghost Rider. He just played Johnny Cage.
Mm-hmm.
But he also said that, like, seeing you guys work and kind of the way you filmed, the way you were on wires, the way you used the camera, just the kind of risks you took, made him want to be kind of whipped around on wires and kind of do the stunts and do whatever needed to be done to just like get the best performance for the film. Like, do you think that you guys being in the thick of it really helped to bring out, whether it's Statham or Cage or even like Gerard Butler and The Gamer, do you think that kind of way of working pulls out those performances in your actors?
I hope so. I mean, we started out never really having a second unit. We want to do everything ourselves. We operated cameras ourselves, and my theory of shooting action kind of came out of the Road Warrior movies or Evil Dead 2. These movies where it's like you can't believe nobody got hurt making the movie. It looks dangerous, so the feeling was always like, if we're putting ourselves on the line, we're putting ourselves in danger making the movie, that's going to come through and you're going to feel that, and it's going to feel more dangerous. It's going to feel more urgent than if you have this feeling that the whole movie was kind of created on a computer.
Oh yeah, there's a great clip I saw of Idris Elba talking about Mark Neville Dean's like famous rollerblades holding onto motorbikes kind of camera, like yeah, to get shots. And I think the quote is something like, "Oh, he's bloody mental." Like that's kind of like Idris Elba's summation of like the kind of the way you guys worked. And like I think especially Ghost Rider, there's a lot of like behind the scenes footage and stuff like that, and you kind of see the way you guys get to work. And yeah, any
Well, it's fun, making movies is fun, and
oh yeah, of course.
I never, I had a chance to hang out on one of David Fincher's sets. One time he was shooting Zodiac, and I got to hang out for the day. It was a really big thrill for me because I'm a huge fan, as I think any filmmaker would be.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of the best of the best, but man, it was so boring to watch him work because you know he he's sitting there with a headset, and by the way, incredibly nice guy, super smart, very So I don't want to I don't want to kind of make it sound like I had a bad experience. It was a great experience, but man, super quietly talking into this headset mic and doing 35 takes of the guy answering a phone. And I was like, I am so glad that you work this way so that I get to enjoy the movies that you make. But I could never do it. I just can't do it. It's like especially in those days. I mean, we just got bored way too easily. And
I guess it's the counterpoint of
it's like a life experience. It's like we were there just as much for what was going on behind the camera as we were for in front of the camera.
well, I guess the counterpoint is like David Fincher is almost like a composer making like some kind of overture or like grand piece of music, whereas you guys were making like fast punk rock that both have their own merits, but one is made a complete different way where it's everything's written out, you give it to the orchestra, whereas you guys are there like, fuck it, we know three chords, we've got our instruments. Not obviously not to say that you guys don't know what you're doing, but like
Right.
the approach is like a bit more ragtag and punk rock in that we're going to be there, we're going to be in and amongst the thick of it and just getting the shots in these kind of really fascinating and like interesting way. And like I believe I've heard you in other interviews say like you invented that without not realized that, just kind of going, we made it up on the spot, like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like in those days, Mark and I were doing like true exploitation movies, and not we weren't doing like, like the Grindhouse Tarantino Rodriguez thing, which was sort of like a wink and a nod, kind of like a tribute to Grindhouse movies. No, we weren't doing tributes to Grindhouse movies. We were making actual Grindhouse movies, which you're sort of inherent in the Grindhouse idea is just sort of this desperation to be noticed, and to get effects. And we never really had a lot of money to do these things, and we didn't have a lot of experience. So it was really just like, what can we do to just get stuff in front of the camera that sort of keeps our adrenaline going. We were afraid of getting bored, so we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And it is a punk rock approach, I think. Punk rock is like you're playing in a club and you're bombing and nobody's into it, so you fucking break a bottle over your head. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm going to take a shit on the stage now, like Gigi Allen, because it seems like you guys are tuning out. So that's kind of what the Crank movies are, is the cinematic equivalent of taking a shit on the stage because the audience is tuning out.
That's amazing. I couldn't think of a better analogy myself than the Crank movies being the Gigi Allen of cinema.
Yeah.
Somebody missed the trick in marketing, I think, there.
Yeah, that should have been the poster.
Before I'd like we jump into talking about like kind of the genesis of the Ghost Rider movie. Before that, you guys wrote the Jonah Hex movie and was set
Mhm.
to direct it. Like, obviously, I'm not looking for some kind of like TMZ scoop or anything like that, but like, what was your initial vision that kind of like led you guys to leave that project? Was it you guys wanted to give it a harder edge, or?
Yeah, I mean the Jonah Hex thing is really like that's a long story that probably will take us off on a tangent
Yeah. No worries.
too
No.
far from Planet Nick. But you know, I will say that it was a good example of just sort of everything that can go wrong in Hollywood kind of went wrong in that development process. The script that we wrote is, I think, the best thing that we ever wrote.
Oh man.
Um, it's not the movie that you saw. If you were one of the 12 people to see the movie, it doesn't resemble the script that we wrote at all. And it was just unfortunate. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's a super long story.
Yeah.
The
No.
movie the movie's a piece of shit, and it's really tragic because it would have been so
Yeah,
good.
no, I'm like I love these ideas of kind of films that what could have been almost like the sliding doors effect of just
Yeah.
and
Well,
like
and you have to develop a really thick skin
yeah.
in this business, you know, because it's so rare when things make it through to the finish line and have any resemblance to what it is you were trying to accomplish.
But I guess
And that's even if they get out of the gate at all. You know, a lot of the most directors that I know, you know, the best and writers, the best things that they've ever written never got made. You know, we were frequently judged by the worst of what we do. You know, like
you look at so much of it, like whether it's like Hodorowski's Dune, like it's
mm,
supposed to be like this amazing piece of work, and I think there's an actual like bound book that
yeah,
Hodorowski has read to Nicholas Winding Refn, like so, like here it is. Here's my vision. I'll take you through it, and it's like we'll never see that. I just wanted to like kind of touch on the Jonah Hex thing, just because of that
yeah.
morbid curiosity I have of those kind of that type
I
of thing.
I love that movie. I mean, I love the movie um, that was written. I really do. I mean, you got to have a thick skin, but that was a heartbreaker.
Oh,
That was a heartbreaker. That one
oh
still
boy,
stings.
oh boy, I'm
And the
feeling
worst thing about
it.
and the worst thing about it is then the movie comes out and our name is on it as the writers. And it's
Oh,
just like, come on, man. And then you have people who are fans actually saying like, look, I know the movie was I can see what you were trying to do with the script, you know. And I said, no, you can't. No, no, no. None of that was our shit. Please don't even be nice. You know, it was unfortunate.
so getting to Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. How did it come about? Like, how early on were you guys brought on? Was there a point where you were going to write it as well, or
Yeah, well, no.
no?
That movie was they were they were getting ready to lose the rights to the character, so they had a couple months to get this movie into production. And if they didn't get it into production, they were going to lose the rights. And they had been fucking around with the script for years. I mean, the actual script, the first draft of the movie that we made, and David Goyer is the credited
Yeah,
writer. The first draft that he wrote is the reason that he's the credited writer was actually written before the first Ghost Rider movie was made. It was set in the American Southwest. It was hard R rated. It was like a horror movie, and it was fucking awesome. It's a tragedy that we couldn't just make the original David Goyer version
yeah.
because that script is badass. You know, it was super dark. There's a sort of a string of the plot that survived through to the version that we made, but you know, over the years it had been rewritten and rewritten. It probably had like 14 rewrites. With this, you know, and this whole idea of moving it into Europe and sort of trying to, I guess, draft off the success of the National Treasure movies and to kind of bring this sort of ancient relic hunting mythology to it or something like that.
Well,
Um, and then we had to do a pass on it just to get it into Romania, which is where we shot it. And then we shot parts of it in Turkey. But I mean, the script was just such a mess at that point. It had gone through so many rewrites that it just made no sense at all. Um, and sometimes what I like to do is just draw attention to things like that.
yeah.
So I added in that voiceover where Johnny Blaze says, "Why does the devil walk in human form on Earth anyway? I have no idea." Well, that was me talking. Like, I really don't know either, guys. I have no idea what the basis of this movie is. But so clearly it wasn't the script that brought us to it. I love the character of Ghost Rider. I was just a comic book kid. Ghost Rider was badass. And then the idea of just doing a Sony movie with Nicolas Cage, I mean, sounded amazing.
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's like, well, okay, we got to be in production in a few months, so get on a plane, and we just threw it together as best we could and tried to get that thing shooting. I guess if I have one regret about that project is I wish that we had made a rated R movie. I wish we had that option, because the idea of doing Ghost Rider as a rated R horror movie, basically a superhero horror movie, I think is really cool. Like that actually could be a really worthy addition to the whole superhero genre.
Well, I think,
but it just wasn't there for us.
From seeing the movie, you can see glimpses, especially like in the humor and like these kind of like comical asides, whether it's the image of Idris Elba's character like hanging out of a tree when he kind of mentions that by like, I was saved by God's grace, or
I'm so happy to have you pull that shot out, because that was just such an improv in post. We literally, like, nobody understood how he survived the fall. We were just like, what the fuck do we do? And we're sitting in the editor, in the editorial room, trying to solve this problem somehow. So we looked at the outtakes and we found we had footage of him in front of a green screen hanging while he was waiting to do something else, looking kind of bored. So he said, well, what if we just put, footage of a cliffside, a tree, and then use that, and then play a little bit of the French national anthem in the background. I mean, that was a true B-movie cheat.
Well, like, it's stuff like that, and just kind of like like some of the sensibilities of it, and like, I guess it's that thing. And I think we would have fast tracked like if it was a hard R, we would have like an R at least. We would have fast tracked all this kind of like, now we're getting it with like the Deadpools and the Logans and stuff like that, and it's like we could have already been playing in that sandbox already, as opposed to.
Well, yes, maybe. I definitely think we would have taken the humor there. But when I say, I'm thinking back, I mean, you're right. Taking the humor in that direction, or actually more accurately in kind of a crank direction, would have been a cool thing to do. But when I'm talking about rated R, I just feel like it should have been more violent.
Yeah. Well,
and just more scary, and to really treat the Ghost Rider as this horrifying character that murders people horribly.
Well, it is that thing as well. Like, you kind of want to see, like, not in this kind of grotesque, like, torture porn way, but like seeing as his thing is he is seeking like vengeance against wrongdoers. You kind of want to see them in pain. So when he hits them with that like fiery, like with the whip that kind of like turns them to ash, you want to see like burning skin, and you want to see them just kind of, you want to see them hurt, basically, as kind of like sadistic as that sounds on like a viewer's point of view. You want to see, like, but yeah, especially with like such a.
Right. Well, that's vengeance, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
To let the unjust feel the same pain that their victims felt. Yeah.
So with with Ghost Rider, like it feels to me like, did you intentionally, like, not that it disregards the first one, but like I feel like you could watch it as a totally separate
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
of
No,
its own.
it really has no relation to the first movie.
And was that was that in the script, or were you guys with the, like, kind of did you guys have a say in that?
I think it was in the script. I mean, this thing opens up with him in Eastern Europe, so there's been a lot of water under the bridge. Now, we could have sort of called back to the first movie in flashbacks or this or that, but it's kind of like, why?
Yeah,
It didn't seem at any point. Like, if we have any kind of real estate to use for backstory, let's use it to explain what the fuck is happening in this movie, because it was pretty convoluted. We didn't. So it just didn't seem to be a good reason to do that.
So how was it meeting Nick for the first time? Obviously, was Ghost Rider the first time you met him, or did you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the best part of the whole thing. We flew out to New Orleans. Basically, we were going to Romania to start prepping the movie, and the idea was we're going to stop in New Orleans and just hang out with Nick for a few hours and talk it over with him. So we flew in, we met him in New Orleans, and showed him a bunch of artwork that we had developed. And kind of the first thing that I wanted to talk to him about was this idea of actually playing the Ghost Rider, because that to me was like, well, this is what I think is going to make this movie feel completely different and hopefully cooler than the first movie. Is, that was just a stunt guy portraying Ghost Rider, or I don't know who it was in the first movie, but Nick is such an incredible and creative physical actor. Let's approach this movie as a dual role. You're going to play two roles. You're playing Johnny Blaze, and you're playing this ancient sort of Egyptian demon, that we know as the Ghost Rider, and you're going to play them both completely different, and we want you to develop a whole physical language for the Ghost Rider, which played right into his whole mystique of like kabuki theater and all that kind of, and basically the idea that when we see the Ghost Rider in action in this movie, there's going to be no doubt that that's you.
Well, from watching,
only one person could do that characterization. That really got him excited. He was like, that's super cool. And that became the basis of pretty much all of our pre-production work with him, was just kind of coming up with that physical language and those kind of ideas. And a lot of those sequences just evolved out of our conversations of, what's going through the mind of this demonic creature. He doesn't think like we do.
Well, yeah, and I definitely feel like as a viewer of the film that him playing the Ghost Rider informs the way that he plays Johnny Blaze. Like, I think the way I've like described it to a friend is Johnny Blaze is almost like it gives me the image of like a cocaine user who hasn't got any cocaine, or just has this kind of like has this thing inside of him that he's trying to. I guess, like, I'll say this, you don't have to agree, but just Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in Everything, a man who really wants to take cocaine but can't. In it's just kind of that energy, and like from hearing from like interviews with Nick about the stuff he did on set, whether it's like the kind of voodoo makeup, and said he sewed like Egyptian artifacts into his jacket and stuff like that. Sounds like he threw himself into the role, and like you can tell, and it's the thing for me is very much knowing that this could have been an art. I wish it was that, but like you see these glimmers of things that I'm like, wow, this is great. Like, very much your guys' direction and Nick's performance are two of like the things that for me that shine so brightly in that film.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love what he did with it. You know, I love the Ghost Rider in that movie. I think is really cool. I like the character design. You know, the I like the way he looks.
Yeah.
That with the black bubbling tar jacket, you know, and the dark burned skull. I like the way he moves. I loved all the visual language and the physical language that Nick brought to it. You know, that to me is the coolest thing about the movie. You know, I'll always wonder, you know, what that movie could have been given another, you know, a couple months to work on a script and to work on pre-production and to really get it, you know, where it needed to be. But I think there's certain things in the movie that are super fun to watch, and most of it is the stuff involving the Ghost Rider and Nick either being Ghost Rider or transforming into Ghost Rider. I mean, and he definitely did bring the desperation of an addict. You know, it was an idea we talked about a lot. You know, and then when he gives into it, it feels horrible, but it feels good at the same time. You know, it's just kind of like the rush of giving into that dark side. And he was a guy who was really battling with drinking at that time. You know, I don't think that's any secret. And he was winning that battle. But as always, anybody who fights that battle, you backslide, and you know, you have failures and successes, and you go back and forth, and it's a hard road, you know. So he could really relate, you know, to sort of that aspect of it, and like kind of the metaphor of Johnny Blaze as an addict who was constantly being pulled back, you know, and sort of the temptation is right there to just give into it.
So you mentioned working with Nick, and that like that was one of the the highlight of doing Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. You must have enjoyed it a lot because obviously you worked with him again in your first solo directing film, Mum and Dad. I watched Mum and Dad for the first time today to get prepared for this because I try and go in a lot of the time to the films quite fresh, and I was always quite, I don't know, not bitter, but like I remember around the time this movie coming out, I'd been offered a chance to go to like a press screening, and I had to work, so I was like, oh man, and it was like I wish I had seen it on the big screen, especially seeing it today because it's fucking great, man. I absolutely just a pressure cooker of a film, and like I don't know how. Yeah, where did that idea come from? Is that something that's been like was brewing in your mind for a while, or?
No, I mean a lot of times it's just you know, we're always trying to think of things that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one of those. It's just an idea you come up with and think like, wow, well nobody's ever done this, so that's good, right? Like let's do it. You know, and then once you get into it, you start to find out why no one's done it before. But yeah, no, Nick is amazing in the movie, I think, and so is Selma.
Like both of them are fantastic, and like even from the get go, like by saying like the pressure, like it's just so tense, and that even from like you kind of see this disdain and like almost like play with horror tropes in that way of like the way it's shot and the way that like the music builds. Like there's a scene that really stuck out to me of like when Nick's like going to tickle the kid, but it's almost got like this menacing tone to it. And,
yeah,
like, it's another film that like.
Did you like the music?
Oh, the music's fucking great. Yeah.
That was an Australian EDM guy called Mr. Bill. I've been a fan of for a long time. I love using guys that like have never done a soundtrack before, and he's just such a great sound designer too.
Yeah.
You know, so he had never done a soundtrack before, and he actually sat in the editorial room with us, set up his whole rig, and then we just kind of like we would be editing, he'd be jamming on stuff. He'd say, "What do you think of this?" You know, we'd import tracks, bang them in. It was just all kind of like we just kind of made it up on as we went. I love the soundtrack. It's really good.
So with Mum and Dad, was Nick the first choice, or was there anyone else in mind when it came to the character of Brent?
He's the first guy that I approached. I mean, obviously, because the nature of the movie is, Dad transforms. He starts as one thing and he ends as something else, and nobody can really transform into a werewolf like Nicholas. Especially we didn't have a ton of money to make the movie. So I knew we didn't have. We weren't going to have a lot of time to shoot action. We weren't going to have a lot of money for CGI or anything like that. So the actors needed to be the special effect. The actors were the production value. So you needed actors who could really go there.
Oh, and they definitely are. Just the turn on a dime. I think Selma Blair brings it so well that in moments you're like, oh, maybe because it's never explained why they go after their kids, and I kept second guessing her especially, where I was like, oh no, maybe she loves her kids, and then it was like. Oh no! She's got a meat tenderizer and is about to kill her daughter.
Both of those sentiments can coexist.
Yeah. And
we love you, but sometimes we just want to.
And there's beautiful.
Selma. Isn't that funny? Because Selma was actually, I was talking about Nick Cage. How we had wanted him in Crank.
Yeah.
Selma Blair auditioned for Crank for the Amy Smart role. And she was awesome. I mean, she was absolutely amazing. She almost got it. So there is an alternate universe where Crank was Nick Cage and Selma Blair.
And then Mum and Dad was Jason Statham and
Amy
Smart. Yeah.
There's probably an alternate reality where that happened, but it did give me a chance to kind of see what it would be like to have those two together. They were great together. I mean, they have such good chemistry, and Selma's just wow.
Well, yeah, the moments that really stick with you are these kind of the film itself is just ramping up the tension and this chaos, and obviously with a pressure cooker, you've sometimes got to let a little of the steam out, and we get these in these kind of flashbacks to the past.
Yeah,
and that scene with the pool table is just. Fuck me. It's so I felt like somebody had walked in with a sock with a couple of pool balls in it and was hitting me because just the intense emotion that you feel, and just this kind of, I don't know, it's would they have needed this kind of reason to want to kill their kids, or almost at that point it's would they have just killed each other eventually, and
right. Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing ended up bringing them together.
I'm not sure if anyone's ever mentioned this in the past, but one of the things that Mum and Dad really reminded me of is work of David Lynch, in that it's kind of this idea of what's behind the picket fence, especially Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks, of everything on the outside looks like the perfect family, and we very much see it in their house with the almost, I find it quite grotesque myself, the live, laugh, love, and the kind of platitudes written on the wall of this kind of
that stuff. Well, and that stuff came from, honestly, when we were scouting, we shot the movie in Louisville, Kentucky, and we were scouting real houses. We didn't have the money to build a set, so we were going to find a house where we could do it. And, we scouted a lot of communities like that with a lot of super nice people, and you're looking through their houses and they all had that stuff, And so it's just man, we have to just completely pollute this house with all of these, sort of uplifting messages that obviously don't reflect anything going on in the house. Well, all that stuff was based on real places we saw.
Well, there's just amazing visual storytelling as well, because one of the things that I commend you for is that you know how to make a whip smart short film. This is the runtime of this is 85 minutes, but you learn so much about like the lead characters in such a short amount of time. Like Nick Cage's character waking up on his desk with porn playing on his like computer tells
Yeah.
you so much about the character of Brent, more than like dialogue or kind of like, and yeah, even the flashes to him in the sports car, like with
So how? So let's talk about the him in the sports car. So I didn't know how we were going to do that. My thought was we were just going to do it with a stunt guy, like a stand-in, and then somehow I would get like a still. I would get like a still frame or do a capture of Cage's face, and then superimpose. Sort of like I would map it on. I ended up doing this technique actually with the mom at the end when she goes flying through the air. We took a capture of the actor's face and mapped it onto a stunt girl. But I thought maybe I'd do something like that with him. And then one day in prep, while we were putting this thing together, one of the PAs said, "This guy is here. He wants to know if he can do something on the movie." And the guy walks up, and literally, it looks like a young Nick Cage with the mustache. I'm just looking at this guy like, "Are you kidding me? Like, dude, you look like young Nick." And he's just like, "Yeah, I've heard that before." He's like, "Well, like I'll do anything on the movie. If you want me to like be a PA, if you want to do this or that." I was like, "No, I have actually the perfect thing for you." It's like, I don't think we have the money to CGI Nick's face on this guy anyway. So we just used that guy as is. And it was just pure luck of a young Nick Cage lookalike. This kid was probably like 19 years old, just happening to wander onto the set.
Amazing. So
he's like, "Do you want me to shave the mustache?" I'm like, "No,
no, keep it on. Yeah, we want a Hyde McDonough look. We want that kind of 1987 Nick Cage.
That's the best part."
I think like one of the things that it's just the films. I can't. I could probably go on for ages just saying like it's fucking amazing, especially from like the like kind of 60s opening. Like it's almost reminded me of like a kind of like 60s sitcom, like title cards and stuff like that. And then this, I don't like, this might seem like a weird comparison, but like to begin with gave me the feeling of like watching Shaun of the Dead for the first time. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the Edgar Wright film Shaun of the Dead, in that like it obviously plays with like that horror element of like a zombie like a zombie invasion or whatever it may be, and just has that feeling of just dread. Like we see these parents waiting outside the school. We kind of like, and it's just, I don't know.
And
like,
we're bringing in a lot of, that scene was populated with extras from the town that we shot in.
Yeah.
And they didn't know anything about the movie. It was just a bunch of parents. We said, parents and kids show up together as pairs as much as possible. So, a couple hundred people show up at this high school. And I just basically told everybody the premise of the film. It's like, okay, all you guys are zombies. You just want to kill your kids. Nobody else's kid. You just want to kill your kids. You'll go past anybody else's kid just to get to yours. Everybody got it. They were like, "Yep." Like, no problem. I mean, they didn't need any coaching at all. They were just right on it.
Oh, I guess they've been method acting since their kids were born, right?
Yeah, they were like, "This is great. This is an opportunity to do what I think about most days anyway."
Well, yeah, you very much leave like the bomb under the table as well. Like, if when you know the premise of what is going on, and then obviously you know that Selma Blair's character's sister is pregnant and expecting at any moment. I think that just built up the dread and tension in me, like especially as like a father myself, having like a 18-month old. I was like, oh no, I know where this is going. I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy it, but it's going to happen. It's going to be terrifying.
That was a fun sequence.
It's great. Like, even like the use of like, I don't know, the GoPro footage, and I can't help but think if there were to be another Crank film, I think GoPros would probably be used in the most fascinating and fun way ever, right?
Maybe we probably just shoot it on an iPhone or something. But yeah, all of that's you look back on those movies and all the stuff we did flying around with cameras. It kind of seems I mean, it's almost run of the mill now, because it's so easy to do that now. But back then, those were huge cameras. I mean, we shot Crank 1 on like a giant Sony ENG looking, like almost like a news camera. This thing was huge, and if we'd have had some of these tiny cameras now, back then, we could have done 10 times as much.
Amazing. Well, let's kind of wrap up the conversation by just talking about, like, you moved from movies to television. Was that just an organic choice? Were you like, this is the exciting sandbox to be playing in now? Like, kind of move.
It is. I mean, honestly, it's pretty hard to make. Well, look, something like Crank could not get a wide theatrical release now. It just couldn't happen. And, there's a handful of guys these days that are making really potent, interesting, fucked up movies that are able to get a wide release. There's a handful of them, and mostly they're working in horror. I'm thinking of guys like Ari Aster.
Yeah.
There's just not that many, and less and less all the time. So, unless you want to do a true indie movie like Mom and Dad, it was a really fun movie to make, but not a lot of people saw it, and that's the fate of most indie movies. It's like, they just end up on some streamer somewhere, waiting for people to discover, waiting for the next pandemic so that people will discover them as they work their way through the end screen to the end screen of Hulu. But if you really want to do fucked up, groundbreaking, strange cinema and be in the zeitgeist and really get to people's eyeballs and have people talking about it and stuff, it's really television now. I mean, television's like the Wild West. There's so much need for content, and there's so much reach that you can really do crazy stuff and actually get it in front of people in a way that you sort of can't with features anymore. So,
well, yeah, with Happy, you directed the 7 episodes of the first season, right?
No, I think I did. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5. I did 5 episodes of the first season and 4 or 5 episodes of the second season, I think.
Oh, yeah. It's like, for people that haven't watched it who are listening, it's just absolutely, it's Crank with, like, it's kind of, it's hard to, how would you explain it, Brian? Sorry, I'm not doing the best of jobs here. It's been a long day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's Crank with a flying unicorn. Not really sure what that show, and it just got like, between seasons 1 and 2, I feel like it got exponentially weirder. I really like both seasons, but I like season 2 better.
Well, that seems to be, is that your MO, that like each thing you like, if you get a chance to do a second, whether it's Crank or whether it's a second season of Happy, that you're like, fuck it, let's make it weirder than it was the first time?
Well, yeah, that was the theory of Crank 2 as well, and I guess you could say it was sort of the theory of the Ghost Rider movie.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just make this exponentially weirder than the first one. I don't know if we succeeded, because the first one is pretty weird in its own right, sometimes by accident. But yeah, look, I just think that, like, probably my primary drive as an artist has always just been a fear of boring myself and boring the audience, so, which is not probably the best it's probably not the best driver of an artist, but I'm sort of stuck with that, so generally the longer I'm at something, the more absurd it's going to get, the more deconstructed, the more punk rock, just the stranger. I can try to be normal for a little while, but like Nick, usually normal doesn't last until the third act.
Yeah, I will speak on behalf of, I think, many people I know who are fans of your work. Please never just try and aim for normal, because it is the weird and the cuckoo bananas crazy shit that we all love and enjoy. You also had you've got a writing credit on the Aldous Huxley Brave New World series for.
Yeah, I developed that as a series with Grant Morrison.
How was it?
And then we kind of backed off. We developed it, we got it off the ground, and into production, and then we sort of backed away because I had to work on season 2 of Happy. So the show has kind of gone on its own, and I haven't even seen any of the footage, so I don't know how it turned out. I hope it turned out okay.
Well, I hope so too, man. Well, to wrap things up, I know now more than ever it's probably the worst time to ask what you have coming up, if anything, or what does the future behold for Brian Taylor, and what can we look to?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for any of us. I mean, right now, like a lot of guys in this business, we're just writing, developing, and sort of behaving as though things are going to go back to normal at some point, but nobody really knows when that is, or if that is, are there still going to be movie theaters after this? I don't know. I have friends who are actors and production people who are convinced that they're going to start shooting in June. They have projects that are on hold. And it's like, yeah, but it's going to get warmer and the thing will die down a bit, and then we're going to go into production in June. I don't know that that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I tend to think there's not going to be any production until next year. I don't know how long it's going to take. So, until then, we're just going to keep doing what we always do, try to come up with new ideas and try to get these projects off the ground, try to convince people with money to spend it on the most ridiculous concepts possible. And then hopefully at some point we'll actually be able to film them.
Twisted Metal, maybe?
Ah, man. That's another heartbreaker. That's a good one.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
Good one. Nick was supposed to be in that too. Nick was going to be Sweet Tooth.
Oh, don't break my heart. Don't break my heart.
We could have been on here on the podcast talking about Nick Cage, Sweet Tooth, and Twisted Metal. Can you imagine? In another alternate world, a better world.
These are all these universes I want to kind of.
Yeah, a better universe than the one we live in.
Well, before I finally let you go, Brian, everybody has a crazy Nick Cage story. What is yours, if any of them are kind of for the masses?
I honestly can't tell the craziest one. But I will tell you, we were talking about his mausoleum, and the first time I met Nick, we were in New Orleans, and he took both of us out that night. He said, do you want to see my mausoleum? I said, well, yeah, of course we do, So we got in the cab and drove across town. It was the middle of the night. It was like midnight, and the necropolis was closed, so we had to jump the fence. And so we're basically breaking into a graveyard at night with Nick Cage with a flashlight, and he took us to see it's a white pyramid, a white marble pyramid, and he told us all about it, and it was pretty spectacular. And then we went and had beignets at Cafe Du Monde.
That sounds fantastic. Did you feel at any moment like you were in a National Treasure sequel when you're hopping fences and breaking into historical landmarks with Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was a National Treasure movie, but hanging out with Nick Cage, you are in a Nick Cage movie.
Perfect. Well,
that is what is happening.
That is a perfect place to leave it, Brian. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on. I will let everybody know where to find you on Twitter and any links to anything that you have. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, man.
Yeah, man. It's good to meet you. And, we're brothers in cage.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brian, I'll let you get on with your day, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
All right.
Okay, take care of yourself.
Get another pint in you.
Yes, please. Well, there we have it. That was an amazing conversation. And yeah, thanks once again to Brian for giving me some of his time. Now more so than ever. I know it's probably easier to have conversations with people because they are in their homes, but still, it just blows my mind constantly that people want to have these conversations, and you can hear people are passionate about what they do, and that's what I love about doing this podcast. I get to speak to these people who love what they do and make stuff that people love as well. Like, I think I've mentioned it in the podcast that Crank hit me at like a certain age, and it hit me at the perfect age. And yeah, like Brian's work has always just been this outsider kind of grindhouse, unapologetic at what it is, and it's great. I wish we could have seen his Twisted Metal film. It would have been so good. I would hope at some point I might use some pester power to try and speak to Mark Neveldine. Again, talked about in this, and yeah, the kind of left or right brain of the kind of operation that they had, and this partnership that spawned these amazing movies. And obviously we talk about the fact that Ghost Rider wasn't what it could have been, but those guys shined that diamond up to the best that they could, and you really see their phonetic and fantastic style, and their fingerprints are all over that movie. Well, that's enough of me just kind of talking about how great Neveldine and Taylor are. Again, thanks so much to Brian for this, and if you want to get in touch with the Caged In podcast, you can do that one of many ways, actually. You can either hit me up on social media, which is at Caged In Pod on all the channels, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or just email me, which is cagedinpod@gmail.com. As always, leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. If there's a rating system, yeah, like more people can hear it, but more importantly, this week and every week moving forward, and we should have been doing it anyway, but educate yourselves what you can do to help other people, and specifically in this case the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, so if you can donate money, if you can donate time and show solidarity at a protest, do that. If you can just take a moment out of your day to sign a petition or write a letter to your local MP about what you could do, or your local official, to kind of raise your concerns as a citizen. Because if we all do our little pieces, like as we're seeing the protests in America, eventually they can't help but listen to the people, and we can do this. We will strive and do what we can to make this better. We can make this a better place to live for all of us. So as always, I've been Petrus Lewis. I've been Caged In. You've been amazing. Bye-bye.